Hey, D-Dexter here with another great math video. Here we go. We're graphing hyperbolas today. It's going to be awesome. So check it out. We've got two forms. This morning today we're talking about centering at negative hk. So we're taking a hyperbola and we're shifting it away from the origin and we're moving it either left or right, up, down, something. So there's some horizontal shift and some vertical shift. So what are the two forms that we see? Well, again, we have x minus h squared, and that's going to be, so the h is always associated with the x and a squared, and minus, notice the minus sign here, y minus k squared, and b squared in the denominator. Then you have the other form, which is y minus k squared over a squared, and minus x minus h squared all over b squared equals 1. Now, the difference between the hyperbola and the ellipse is that a squared is always who's out front, okay? Because that's the one that determines how the branches are going to turn. They'll either, in the x direction, they'll either swing out in the x direction, or they'll swing in the y direction, right? So it's either going to be up and down like this, or side to side. So how do you determine which way it goes? Well, it determines who's out front, okay? If the x is out front, then it will swing in the x direction. If the y is out front, then the branches will reach in the y direction, okay? So the focal points. Now this time, it's c squared is a squared plus b squared, right? And so c is the value of the square root plus or minus of a squared plus b squared. Because now we want the focal points out, away, outside of the branches. All right, so we can see here that with the x out front, we are going to have the branches reach in the x direction. Now again, this looks like it's centered at the origin, but we're going to look at some graphs here in a minute where we're moving the center of the hyperbola. But just to give you some idea, this is where we are with the value of a and the value of b. So a will be in the x direction because it's in the x coordinate there, and b is in the y direction. And you're like, well, why do we need a b value? It doesn't seem to go anywhere. Well, I'll show you in a second how that gets worked in. And then the focal points will, again, be outside the branch, right? So these are the branches. And in this case, the x will be the major axis. So again, we could put the x out here is the major axis. So this will be major axis. Right? It will be in the x direction. And this one here, then you have the major axis will be the y. The major axis will be the y category. So let's look and see what that looks like. Here we have the y out front and minus the x. A squared again stays with who's ever out front. It's no longer determined by who's the bigger number. It could have a smaller number there. Doesn't necessarily make a difference. It will when you graph it, but for right now, it's not determined by that. It's just determined by who's out front. When we graph the y category now, your a is the distance from the center to the vertex of the little parabola-looking deal here. And then a distance down, and then c is the distance from the center to wherever the focal point is. So you'll notice that your focal points now are outside of the branch, right? They're on the outside. They're not tucked inside like an ellipse. So these are some major differences between the ellipse and the hyperbola is where we're looking. All right, let's look at an example now. Because, like I said, here, b, where does this b? How do we use this b value? Well, we have to look at an example to see. Now, I know this seems like a lot going on here, but I'll try and walk you through it slowly. Example number 1, it says x minus 2 quantity squared over 36. minus y plus 1 quantity squared over 9 equals 1. So again, my a value is out front in blue, so a squared is 36, so a will be plus or minus 6. Minus y minus 1 squared over 9, so b squared is 9, so b is plus or minus 3. Now I have to think, well, where's the center of this? The center is located at negative h, negative k. So again, we have the center at the opposite sign of 2, negative 2, which is positive 2, and the opposite sign of positive 1, which is negative 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm drawing my center first. So if I go over 2, down 1, that's my new center, okay, labeled here as the center. And so we could mark that at the C as the center, right? There's our center. And what we're going to do is we're going to go 6 units in the x direction. So I go out 6 units, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We end up at negative 4. And again, I like to draw these little lines in here, the dashed lines. That keeps my value, where my vertice will be on the right y value and also on the right x value. So if I go 2 plus 6, I should end up at positive 8 in the x category. Now I'm going to put a dot where my b's will be. So I'm going to go up 3 units, 1, 2, 3. I should be at y equal positive 2. And if I go down 3 units, 1, 2, 3, I'll end up at y equal negative 4. Now, so I draw this little new crosshair, if you will, this little new center line. I have my 4 spots here, my vertices. Now, you'll notice that the B doesn't really do much, but what it does is it helps me draw this box. And this box is going to be pretty vital as we go to draw the branches. Before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my foci or my foci out here. Again, C is the value of the square root of 36 plus 9. And again, we see that that's 45. And I ask myself, well, let's see, it's between 7 and 6. So the square root of 49 is 7 and 6. So my focal point units will be between 6 and 7 units away. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units again was where the 6 was for the x squared. So my focal point will be just outside of that, between 8 and 9. And my other focal point will be, again, 6 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So between 6 and 7. So I'll be between negative 4 and negative 5. So I labeled my focal points. And now what I need to do is I have to actually graph the branches of the hyperbola. So this is why we set this box up. And what we're going to do is we are going to we drew this in orange, so here's our box. And what I'm going to do is I'll basically go from the center and I'll make a new dashed line through each of the corners. Now, and I'm drawing it out in the x direction because this is where my hyperbola will be. The branch of the hyperbola will be, because it's x squared is out front, I'm going to be elongating or branching out in the x direction. So I'll do that, and then I'll come over here and do this one, and this goes out this way, and then this one goes through that corner. So they all go through the corner. Now what I need to do is I need to graph the branches. And remember, it's in the x category, so our branch will actually hug these asymptotes, come in, touch the vertice, and then swing out. So I'll have some graph that looks like this, right? The purple is where the branch is. And then I'll do the same thing over here. Hug this line, come in, touch, and then I'll swing out this way. And so my graph will look like that. All right? So the branches will go through. You find that you draw the box. Then from the center, you draw some more lines to all the corners, and then what we'll do is we'll draw our branches based upon the x direction, and we'll do another example where it's the y direction. You can see it over there. And so here I am with my graph, okay, of the hyperbola. All right, let's look at the next example here. And so we've got example number 2, and it says y minus 1 quantity squared minus x plus 3 quantity squared. Y minus 1 squared is over 16, and x is over 49 is equal to 1. So again, the size always out front is the a squared, right? So always out front with a hyperbola. So a squared is 16, a is plus or minus 4. B squared is 49, and so it's plus or minus 7 units away. So again, what I did was I first found my center. Now, here's the tricky part. Make sure that you follow y's and x's. X and h are still associated with x. They go in the x direction. So I see this is where a lot of people make mistakes, is they say, oh, well, I'm going to go positive 1, negative 3 as my center. Don't do that, right? We have to make sure that the x is still with the x coordinate. So my center will be opposite sign of 3, which will be negative 3, and opposite sign of negative 1, which is positive 1. So my center will be at negative 3, comma 1. And then in the x direction again, x is green here, so I'm going to go 7 units in the x direction because it's under the x, right? So I'm going to go 7 units out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Negative 3 and 7 is positive 4. Negative 3 and 7 more units out is negative 10. In the x direction, I'm going to go positive 4 units, so I'm at 1. So 4 more would be at 5. And 4 down will be at 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm at right here at negative 3. Negative 3. Negative 3. So, let's see. We got to correct this here. All right, we can go like this. And then we redraw our little square. See, everyone makes mistakes. It's all right. It's math, so we're here. We go across, and then we're there. All right. So we have found 4 units down. 1, 2, 3, 4. We should end up at negative 3, and we do. And then from here, what we can do is we can find our focal points. Our focal points, this time, it's in where our branches are going to be in the y category. So they'll reach up and down, right? And so then we have to find our focal points. Our focal point will be 16 plus 49. So 16 plus 49 is the square root of 65. So that's 8 and 9 units away. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So it's down here between negative 7. If we go 8 and 9, so negative 9 will be negative 8. And between negative 7 and negative 8 in the y category here. And it will be between 8 and 9 units up. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be, if this is 1, 8 would be 9, and 10. So it's going to be between 9 and 10. So between 9 and 10, it'll be somewhere in there. All right, so those are pretty far away. Well, you'll notice that when we graph this thing, you're going to see these branches are pretty wide. Okay, so we go through the same method. We start at the center, and we draw little dashes like this out to all 4 corners, right? And 4 corners, and we go to the 4 corners. And now, you need to ask yourself, well, where do these little asymptotes, they go out for a ways, right? And we ask ourselves, well, where do we draw the branches? Well, the branches, again, are determined by who's out front. The y category is out front, so we are going to graph them in the y category. So I will hug along here, take hold of my vertex, come out, and I will be out wide like that. Same thing down here. I will come, I'll skip through my vertex, and I will hug these outer things. So you'll notice that in this time, these branches are pretty wide, the purple, right? This is the graph of the hyperbola when it's been shifted -3, +1 over 3 up 1. We graphed the x direction. We graph the y direction. The y is out front, so my hyperbola will face up and down. Okay, that is graphing a hyperbola in HK, not centered at the origin. So hopefully you took some great notes. Rewind this, go back through it. It's a good time. Okay. Hey, thanks again. Appreciate you watching, and keep it mathy. Peace.